Well, good morning and welcome in everyone from around New Zealand, from around the world, watching in at any time. If you're live with us, welcome in. If you're catching us via our Facebook or YouTube channels at any time, welcome in to what we hope is going to be an amazing conversation. It is episode 3 of 4 in our series on the future of Auckland sport. So brought to you by the team at United via Sport, but also thanks to the support of regional facilities, Auckland Tourism Events and Economic Development, and Auckland Stadiums. My name's Andrew Dewhurst, delighted to host this episode, which features and focuses on high-performance sport in the Auckland region, which will have some relevance to the rest of the country as well. Let's have a look at what we've got coming up for you and the way that we will take you through this conversation as we move on through this episode. We're going to be joined by an absolutely stunning panel, and we're going to have a look at their thoughts and spark some conversations on high-performance sports. We're going to identify the issues and, in doing so, brainstorm some tactics to help unite Auckland via sport. Bada-boom. We are going to focus very much, as mentioned, on the future of high-performance sport in this episode, having already looked at women in sport and community sport on this very show. And we do that with a panel discussion. And on that note, let's introduce them, bring them in, because we don't have the answers. We're looking to try and generate the answers, and we do so with some amazing people who are at the coalface of the industry that some of us commentate on, whether it's through official channels or whether it's over a drink with mates. We have an amazing panel. Mike Stanley, 2 times World Championship winning rower, former CEO of Rowing New Zealand. We're going to lose half the show here with the CV. Director of Sport New Zealand, President of the NZOC, CEO of AUT Millennium, and most importantly, a former Westlaker. Welcome in, Mike. Great to have you with us on this show.
Marina, Andrew, and fellow panelists.
And we have Fiona Allan, with close to 20 years working in central and local governments with an expertise in strategic leadership. And she's applying that expertise currently as CEO of Paralympics New Zealand. Hi, Fiona.
Hi there.
And Danny Hay, someone I've grown to know very well over the years through my love of football, one of only a handful of New Zealanders to play in the English Premiership. Of course, a former All Whites captain, and now he's the man at the helm as head coach of the All Whites. Danny, welcome in.
Thanks, Dewey. Really pleased to be here.
Wonderful to have you, and thank you so much for your time. Of course, we should have been with you live from the Herald Theatre, Auckland Live, but with the lockdown here in Auckland, we are featuring via Zoom. So great to have everyone here. Francis is pulling the strings, and Dean is also watching in the background. Dean McLaughlin, of course, the curator of United via Sport. I want to start, guys, with a vision and what you see as your vision or your wish list for high performance sport in the areas that you are involved in. And I think it's fair to say that with you on our panel, we cover so many different areas of high performance sport. Mike, if we can start with you in your various capacities, what do you see as your vision? What might be some of the items on your wish list for high performance sport in Auckland?
Well, Andrew, I think the most important thing is that every young Aucklander who has talent is able to explore their potential, and if they have the talent and aptitude to compete at the highest level, they have the support and the facilities and the culture that helps them in that journey. And that's in some parts of Auckland, I think that is apparent, but we live now in a rapidly growing city, a city that has quite significant congestion. We have a unitary plan that is looking at intensifying housing throughout the Auckland urban region. We need to make sure that our sport and recreation facilities are fit for purpose in this new environment. And we also have the people who are being developed and encouraged to contribute to our high performance and our development performance system across the city. So I think we face quite significant challenges, and they are probably right with us at the current COVID time. but also maybe some solutions are there as well, and how we are actually dealing with the limitations on our movement and how we communicate and how we interact with each other in that COVID time, which can help us when we get back to normal.
Mike, I'm sure we're going to talk a little more later about facilities, but I'm fascinated by this fit for purpose with our facilities, be they an international quality stadium or perhaps a community-based facility. For the lay people out there, what does that mean, fit for purpose, when we have this conversation, when you talk about facilities?
Well, if we look at the Olympic arena, I guess, we can see that we've got a National High Performance Training Centre based at AUT Millennium, and that is servicing many of the athletes, or many athletes in Auckland in that Olympic bubble. And we've got other specialised high performance centres associated with professional sports teams and some of the national sports organisations. And Danny will talk to football, I'm sure, in a moment. And at that level, we're not too bad. But Auckland's a big city, and is it convenient for people to be accessing those facilities at that level? So probably there's an opportunity in South Auckland to develop a secondary hub. But there are also many sports that sit outside that pretty well resourced Olympic high performance bubble. And I'm thinking about, with my Olympic and Commonwealth Games hat on, many of the Commonwealth disciplines that aren't, and many other codes that don't sit within that central core. So what do they need? And it seems to me there's an opportunity with infrastructure being developed in the city, that we have multi-sport hubs wherever possible created, where we can actually bring some sports together and get economies of scale that can provide some additional resources that clubs and schools and community groups can't do on their own.
Yeah, fascinating. It's one of the huge challenges, and we'll talk about that in a moment or two. Fiona, from your perspective, Paralympics ever increasingly prominent for us, and wonderful, a joy that New Zealanders have taken from our superstars. I'm thinking of Liam Malone in more recent times, Sophie Pascoe. What a star she is. What, though, is your vision for high performance sport from your perspective?
Well, I think I would all agree that high performance sport needs to look at doing things differently in the future than the way it's been done before. So I think we may need to look at being more innovative, reviewing our current structures and systems that we have in high performance sport, and definitely being more collaborative, ensuring that investment streams coming into sport are being seen as strategic rather than tactical would be good. And at the moment, it's really supporting sport to continue to open their doors and continue to operate. Then secondly, a vision that I would have is to assist them to thrive and flourish in what would be a new environment. And I guess if I had a wish, as we look forward with the opportunities, is that sport gets back on its feet in New Zealand. Ensuring that sport is accessible for disabled people is something that should never be overlooked.
Yeah, across all levels. Our focus today is high performance sport, but certainly that's a given that should be right through the community as well. Danny, your role is quite a unique one. I'm not sure how many times you've been on the grass with your players and actually taking a training session, but tell me what's your vision, and I'm fascinated to explore a story that I know that you've shared already, and that is looking to make sure that the Kiwi aspect of being an all-white, of being a representative New Zealand footballer, is very much a part of your future. What's your vision and wish list?
Yeah, look, interesting, and some great comments from Mike and Fiona. Really interesting from my perspective, and obviously looking specifically at football. We're going through a review at the moment, a nationwide review. And I guess the wish list is to really create high quality competition structures, to identify and then support coach development, our best coaches around the country, and making sure that they're getting the support and growth that they need, because ultimately good coaches are going to create very good players at the high performance level. And then, as has been touched on, the facilities. And I look here in Auckland, we've got some good facilities around the place for the community. You look at the likes of Western Springs with the facility they've got there, with the artificial turfs, but it is a real challenge. And Mike touched on it. It's a ever evolving city that we've got here. It's ever growing. The numbers of young footballers in particular is going through the roof, and young female footballers, which is really exciting. Those numbers are growing. So we need to continually try and create more facilities. And the idea of that Fiona just touched on sharing between sports, I think is really, really important as we move into the future. But ultimately for me, it's about creating pathways for our talented young players. And that's part of this review that we're going through now inside the game in New Zealand, is ensuring that we have better pathways for talented players to be able to make the most of their ability. And it is quite alarming at the moment how there is a little bit of a glass ceiling at senior level in football in this country, how the young players aren't being given or being afforded the opportunities to really evolve and develop and show how good they can become.
It's, that's a fascinating comment you've just ended on, Danny, and a sport that I've been involved in recently in basketball, and goodness me, out of adversity. And we saw, just to touch on your point about the opportunities for younger players, we saw a National Basketball League played without any imports. They couldn't travel, they couldn't come here because of COVID, and that afforded the young players, the young Kiwis, an opportunity. And arguably, Danny, it was the best National Basketball League that the country's seen in 20 years. So there was evidence that if the young players are given the chance in any sport, that they can thrive, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. And I think if people saw the squad that I picked last November in our first chance for me to take the team and be at the helm, I went with, I think we started against the Republic of Ireland with 5 19, 20-year-olds. And that's because I honestly believe if they're given the chance and given the opportunity to shine, they'll rise to it. We've got, like I said earlier, huge numbers playing. The talent pool is really growing, and it is just ensuring that we're creating viable and valid pathways for them to reach the top level if they've got, as Mike said, the aptitude to do that as well.
Let's recap quickly now, and as I say, we could talk for an hour on any one of these topics, but let's have a look at perhaps encapsulate what our panel has included so far with regards vision. And as I say, this is a conversation starter, folks. So if you've got any more, please join with us on our social media channels and give us your thoughts. But let's go to that vision slide now and just recap as to what we've looked at, what we've discussed. And out of this vision slide, I'm sure will come some of the challenges. So don't focus on the deficits, be positive. And we'll talk about that more. Be Kiwi. It's such a strength of ours. That athletes are connected. That's across sports as well, not just within a silo of one sport. We'll talk about COVID, but we mustn't fall behind. Facilities, this is a big one that Mike highlighted, everyone has, fit for purpose. They've got to be accessible, social distancing friendly in this modern era. Funding is going to be a big one. That funding's got to be used very wisely. We've got to connect across the different sports. And as Danny's also mentioned, and I'm sure consistent across all of our sport at high performance level, is pathways, player pathways and coach development. So I look at the vision, I look at what things might be, what we'd like them to be like, something of the wish list, if you like. Let's now turn our attention to challenges currently facing high performance sport. And the elephant in the room is a rather large one, not behind here somewhere, but it's in everyone's room. It's an elephant called COVID-19. Mike, from your perspective, and goodness me, talk about it the coalface. You're there at ATU Millennium. What's the impact of COVID been, in your perspective, on high performance sport?
Well, Andrew, my feelings immediately go to the athletes that are impacted by this. It is a difficult time for them, and I was a member of the 1980 Olympic team that got boycotted out of Moscow, and the uncertainty for many people at that point was deeply unsettling. But what I've been really encouraged by is that over the initial upset about not being able to attend competitions and qualify for Olympic Games, and indeed having the Olympic Games postponed, is that our athletes are sort of, the ones that I've talked to, have taken stock. Some of them have realised that perhaps it's a bridge too far, and they're not going to take that challenge on. But most of them are right in there, and they are taking the day-to-day challenge of improving their performances as much as they can. And that's, I guess, what they've been taught to do. Focus on the process, focus on the moment that you're in, and being as good as you can be, and let these big decisions that have yet to play out, and the COVID-19 pandemic has got to play out. They can't influence that. They've got to focus on what they're doing. So there's been a lot of great improvisation. I know, it's, and Danny's pointed to it, how good our coaches are at thinking outside the square and doing things differently. We've always been a country that's had to make a lot out of a little, and overcome adversity. So I'm heartened by what I'm seeing in terms of how the sports system's responding and its nimbleness, and also how our athletes are responding.
Fiona, I imagine that the challenges for you and your organisation and your athletes are very similar to those that Mike has described, and our thoughts turn first to the athletes. In Paralympic sport, though, are those challenges magnified? Sometimes we make assumptions and we don't think of the challenges that Paralympic athletes face simply in getting to places, in accessing training facilities. And of course, many of them have to be even more wary of a respiratory illness, such as this pandemic is around the world. What have been the challenges for you and your organisation?
We're facing the same challenges as Mike has mentioned. However, I guess PNZ, Paralympics New Zealand, and the Paralympic movement in general is built on resilience and determination. And it's at times like that we and our members and our volunteers, administrators, coaches, athletes have all definitely had to draw on that. And as New Zealanders, we tend to do that quite well and adapt quite well to different situations. Arguably, there's never been a more challenging time for high performance sport in New Zealand. We not only a National Paralympic Committee, but we also run 3 high performance sports of paracycling, paraswimming and shooting parasport. So our para athletes just 3 days ago would have entered into the stadium at Tokyo for the opening ceremony. That is not happening. So when we turn our attention to our para athletes, they're faced with uncertainty. They're faced with increased mental and physical demands. At the moment, we're seeing that they don't know when they can resume international travel for training and competitions. And some are sort of now reassessing, their careers, their personal goals. And with the Paralympic Games now another year away, needing to reassess what that means now for them on a personal level. And all of these are really tough decisions for our athletes that they're having to make. And so I think that through our para athletes, and what I've learned as chief executive is to focus my energy on what I can do, look at what I can control, and the need to be flexible and adaptable to the situation that's in front of me. And so the COVID situation, I think, has allowed us all to be grateful for being a New Zealander and afforded our organisation and our people to revisit the way in which we do things. And like Mike said, our athletes have been so adaptable and flexible with moving into a COVID environment. For many, they had to move their training environments into the homes, into their garages, and replicate those training environments. And we've had terrific support from the high performance system, from strength and conditioning coaches thinking outside the square, from coaches having to think differently to support our athletes during this time.
Yeah, and Danny, before I come to you, Mike, I want to come back to you on highlighting what you and Fiona have both talked about, and that is we can't take it for granted that the athletes will automatically cope. And I want to lead into the support that's provided, and this is a huge challenge for all high performance athletes, and sometimes it's been overlooked, and it may be very different now, Mike, to when it was when you were rowing in the late 70s and 80s, but that is the mental health and well-being. These issues, this current environment is incredibly stressful. That must be a huge challenge, Mike, for the likes of the New Zealand Olympic Committee in terms of supporting those athletes.
Well, I think it is, and fortunately, things have improved significantly since the 1980s, thankfully. But look, there's a really good team at High Performance Sport New Zealand and others who work with athletes. But I think it's wider than that. I think it's about friends, family, people sitting down and talking through these issues and being honest about them, and realizing that, you know, many times in sport, there is uncertainty anyway. There's uncertainty of outcomes when you're going into any competition, and it's just about putting this in perspective. I think if there can be a tendency to sort of overstate that. I think our athletes they're tough, and they've reconciled the situation they're in, and they're making the very best of it.
Danny, we've the advantage of having you with us today, specifically with that coach hat on. And I can only imagine, I alluded to it earlier, that I'm trying to think of another coach. Basketball might be the closest, but goodness me, they still have many players here in New Zealand and Australia close at hand. Your players, in fact, you want your players to leave home. You want them away from New Zealand, so playing in the best possible leagues they can be. Has one of the biggest challenges for you currently and going forward in a post-COVID environment been communication and how you stay in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's a unique situation, and it's one that I've had to adapt and learn as I've gone. I guess my coaching career to date has allowed me to have multiple contact sessions with the players, whether that be on the pitch, off the pitch. So with, you know, the best part of probably 90% of our players in the wider all-white squad applying their trade overseas in some of the best leagues around the world, it's forced me to have to rethink how I coach. And it's not an excuse to not actually coach. I think we can still get a lot done. COVID's created a few issues, but to be honest, for me personally, it hasn't changed a huge amount. In terms of the way I communicate with the players. The first thing that we really needed to take care of and ensure was just the well-being of the players. As I intimated earlier, we've got a number of young players playing overseas now, some in not the most glamorous of countries or leagues. And, you know, I think it was just ensuring that they felt like they had some really good support networks. So we've done things like multiple Zooms with the group. We've had Dom Vitesse, who's the team sports psychologist, work with the players. Those that have felt like that they really benefited from individual work with him were encouraged to do so. So it was just constant communication. Obviously, I stay in touch with them individually as well, via phone calls, WhatsApp. We have our team manager. Even people like the sports scientist, who they have a great relationship with, is constantly reaching out and touching base with these players just to ensure that there's that constant connection and they feel like there's a real tie back to New Zealand. Other things that we've done, we've had a Zoom with Ryan Nelson, and most people will remember Ryan for what he did for the country and for football in 2009, 2010 at the World Cup. Leading the team to what was an undefeated record. So that was incredible for the new breed, the young players coming through, and even those that had actually played with Ryan, just to reconnect with him. And I think that's been the big thing for me is, and you alluded to it earlier, Dewey, just saying that For me, it's just reminding these players about being Kiwi. A lot of them have been out of the country and away from New Zealand for a long time. You think about players like Winston Reid. He left when he was a teenager. Chris Wood left when he was a teenager. So it's just reconnecting with New Zealand, reminding them of who we are and where we come from, and some of those key attributes around what we want to see in our high performance sportsmen and women. And I think the last thing that we've done in terms of like specific coaching around the tactical element, I send out video messages. So as I sort of said earlier, for me, it's not an excuse because I don't have the players on the pitch to not keep evolving our style of play and understanding of how we want to develop as a team. So I've got to be very careful that I'm not overloading. So I'm acutely aware, having played as a pro myself, that they're getting a lot of information, a lot of work in their club environments. So I've just got to make sure that the timing of those video messages really is quite powerful. So I don't overload them with that, but just ensure that the messaging leading into potential games should be at the right time.
Great insight. Thanks, Danny. I want to highlight a couple of issues that I'm going to guess that are affecting you. I know they're affecting the sports that I'm involved in, and they're kind of linked. And that is the obvious financial pressure. Mike, I'll come to you first. That COVID is putting pressure not only on the ability to go and play a game and get a gate or generate revenue that way, but commercial sponsors are going to rethink their plans going forward. We may not have seen the biggest hit yet in that sense. And the likes of the NZOC has commercial sponsors, but also government investment. We've seen wonderful support initially, but financially, some real challenges there, Mike, as far as you can see?
Yes, well, there are, Andrew, and sport has a wonderful opportunity with the fund that the government announced recently, and that's been considered how that will be used. And that is partly about recovering from COVID, but also resetting and some of the challenges that sport faced that Fiona talked to earlier. How do we do this? How do we do things differently and future-proof sport in this country, not only at the high performance level, but also at the community sport level? What new learnings are coming out of this COVID environment that will help us do that? But yet, if you look at globally, our advisors at the NZOC tell us that there could be up to 40% less money available in sponsorship globally. And that will start to be seen soon. Most of the big events have contracted income in them, and we won't see that hit immediately, but over time that could. And I also think with the the impact of COVID and people's reflection on that perhaps things that are social will become more important in terms of where sponsorship dollars get directed. And of course, we've got the whole problem with events and how whether we have spectators and whether there's a gate associated with them, and that's mixed in with a background of already fragmenting interest in sport due to the many different sports that are on offer, but also things like e-games. So there are significant financial challenges ahead of us.
And I need to stay with you on this one because, again, with your facilities hat on, if you like, out there at AUT Millennium, has it seen a change in the way? Have you had to be very adaptable in the way your facilities are utilised and indeed going forward? I guess this kind of comes back to the whole fit for purpose conversation as well.
Well, absolutely, and in the COVID times, obviously people getting close together and doing things together is something that we've been prevented from doing, and it raises the concern in people is that, do I want to do that as part of my normal life, and they become quite cautious. So we run a mixed model of a high performance facility and a community facility. So rebuilding people's confidence to come in to a multi-sport environment and where they're going to be in close proximity to others is quite difficult, and it has a financial impact, a significant one.
A quick comment, Fiona and Danny, I'll just open the floor to you both in terms of the financial implications. Are you both feeling that? Are you seeing that as a significant challenge in your respective areas, Fiona?
Well, I think it was excellent. The government recovery package that was announced for 265 million into sport, we've never seen anything like that as a further injection into New Zealand sport. And I think what we know is that sport does unite and connect people, and it's a great leveller during times of crisis and can help get people back into some normality. So the opportunity for Sport NZ and both High Performance Sport New Zealand that moved really, really swiftly to reconfirm further investment in both the community sport and also high performance sport for a further year was really appreciated by the sector. Now, there's a great opportunity ahead of us for the reset and rebuild, and the potential to look at, restructure, change, adapt, do things differently, and do things different and better than what we may have done before, and utilise the investment that goes into high performance sport and community sport more effectively. We've been impacted at Paralympics New Zealand. We've had a reduction in our funds. We are now running sort of 3 Paralympic Games within a 4-year condensed time frame. We have faced a 70% reduction in gaming and community trust funding, and also potentially up to 100 in donations and fundraising. It's not a time to be going out into the community asking for money. And so we also have put our fundraising endeavours on hold right now as well.
Annie, I don't need to come to you for this. Your game of football's flush. I mean, you're not worried at all about funding, are you?
It is. Oh, look, I've got no doubt that the government injection has been a lifesaver for many clubs and many environments, without a shadow of a doubt. But as you sort of make light of there, Julie, it's a constant battle in football at community level and at high performance level in terms of the funding, and that's essentially why the All Whites have to generally go and travel abroad, because the cost of bringing teams down to New Zealand, playing at home, bringing our own side down is absolutely enormous, and is just not a possibility at this stage. We just need the All Whites to qualify for a few World Cups on the bounce and bring some money into the coffers.
Absolutely. Well, let's recap. And again, our time is limited, but let's recap on some of those challenges that have been highlighted by our wonderful panel here today. You're watching The Future of Auckland Sport. This is episode 3, focusing on high performance sport, as we look at some of those challenges now that have indeed been highlighted. And they're challenges that some come out of COVID, and some, of course, are there anyway, and they're consistently, regardless of the outside environment. But coping with COVID is certainly one. The significant financial hole, and we can't underestimate that is not going to be a quick fix. High performance sport facilities by global standards. Do we have enough? No, we would always like more. Having access and contributing knowledge to funding decisions. It's great to have this money, but I'm sure the panel will all nod in unison here that they want to have a say. They want to be involved in that decision-making process. And it's been commented on both in our vision, but also in the challenges, and that is for Auckland City, future-proofing a city that is ever-changing, growing so quickly. So some of the challenges highlighted there in our conversation so far. But we can talk about vision, we can talk about challenges, but that's all well and good, but we need to try and contribute to the answers. We need to try and help that conversation move to the next level. What are the key actions to come out of this? What do we need to try and initiate, put in place to see improvement, to see us get out of this in a healthy state? Mike, from your perspective, and again, go back to your introduction, that you've got so many different roles that I'm sure you're keeping an eye on, but what are some of the initiatives you would like to see within high performance sport in Auckland to see us all come out of this in a better state?
Well, I think it's ensuring that the current entities, regional sports organisations, national sports organisations, are able to do their job well. Because, you know, sport is about people. I'll come to facilities in a moment, but it is about people. It's about developing people and allowing them to share their knowledge across sport. Because, you know, while we're talking and focusing on high performance, it has a broad effect on the whole sporting ecosystem. And making sure that we can continue to have sport available to young Aucklanders, I think is one of the key things. And the high performance piece of that is what gets people's attention. So developing people, keeping good people in sport, and allowing them to contribute to it, I think is a really important part of it. When it comes to facilities, I mentioned earlier, Auckland is growing rapidly, becoming more intensively urbanised. We need to look at where there are deficits in those facilities and how they can be addressed, particularly in our fast-growing communities. If you look at South Auckland, how quickly housing has been rolled out there, and similarly in the north and the west, what are those communities going to be contributing to the city in a sporting sense into the future? So we need to be at the table when the decisions are made about these things. And I think that we talk about roads, we talk about water and all those key infrastructures. And yes, they are key because they are about us, our health and well-being as citizens. But actually having social things is really important as well. And sport is one of our most important social activities in Auckland and indeed this country. And it's quite different to any other international setting that I'm aware of, how important sport is in our communities.
Mike, just to add a question on that note, I'm guessing that you perhaps don't feel that you have been at the table enough in regards to that facilities conversation, because goodness me, in Auckland, that's been ongoing for what, 10 or 15 years?
On a personal level, no, I haven't been involved in that. That's not a complaint because there are vehicles for doing this, but I think that people tend to underestimate how important sport is to Aucklanders and to Kiwis, and therefore the priority, the voice that sport has in some of these conversations, and this is really strategic stuff, is lost. And we need to find a way of ensuring that's there.
Fiona, is Mike singing from the same hymn sheet as you there in terms of facilities? And can I ask you, in terms of action points, in terms of initiatives, what would you like to see? Purely selfish from a Paralympics perspective, high performance focus, but that automatically is going to have a community benefit as well. What would you like to see? How engaged would you like to be in the facilities conversation?
Well, our main aspiration is to ensure that everyone can participate in sport and physical activity in their local communities. And for us, ensuring that includes women and girls, disabled people and other vulnerable communities that might be currently missing out due to a number of factors. And so for us to ensure that there is accessibility within those venues, and I don't just mean the physical accessibility about getting in and getting back out again and getting around once you're in the facility, but the work that we've been doing at Paralympics New Zealand to try and shift people's perceptions of disabled people in New Zealand through the amazing, inspiring ambassadors that we have of our para-athletes and Paralympians, is in order to do just that, to change people's attitudes. And that's also one of the biggest barriers. And when we talk about an opportunity to create and utilise sport as a mechanism for social change, then Paralympic sport, our para-athletes, our athletes in New Zealand are amazing role models to do that. And I think that was pretty much witnessed during the first lockdown 4 and 3 levels that New Zealand was in, and then recently in Auckland at level 3. A huge credit to our high performance athletes. Many of them took it upon themselves to go into social media and provide what was hope and inspiration for the nation when we needed it the most. And I think we would all agree that, the inspiration we get from watching your team, Danny, play, and our Olympians, Mike, and Paralympians, high-performance sport people, it allows and enables and it inspires others and future generations to come. So I think, first and foremost, investing at this time into our people, and then looking at how we support organisations, providers to continue to open the doors, as I said earlier, but also more than that, thrive and be better organisations, and be organisations that when they are resetting and rebuilding and developing their plans, that are thinking of ways of including all the community and the local community so that everybody can experience a facility or a sport.
Danny, I might ask you to relate this to something I know you can share with us. You've shared it with me already, and that is about collaboration and that we're not siloed. Is that something you'd like to see coming out the other side of this, that to improve Auckland sport at a high performance level, that there's a greater sharing of knowledge, and have you experienced that already in your relatively new role as head coach with the All Blacks?
Yeah, look, I think that's a great point, because the one thing we've got in this country is a huge amount of expertise and experience across different facets of sport. And I think that's probably been the one factor, as you sort of touch on, Julie, that has blown me away, is the willingness of New Zealanders and top New Zealanders to actually share and collaborate. And so people like Wayne Smith have been so generous to me, Dame Nolene as well, so JK, Dames and Sirs. It's phenomenal though. That's just how generous they are with not just their time, but sharing their experiences, so that I can take that back into my own environment and try and develop that. And look, it's something that actually inspired me to create a high performance coaches network within our football fraternity. So we regularly now bring the most influential and key coaches together on a monthly basis. Something that really I think has been lacking for a long time inside the game, where people have got a voice. They understand the direction we're trying to take things as national team head coaches. And they can now collaborate and feedback as well. So I think that for me is absolutely critical. And really, I think COVID, with everybody sort of like this now, being so used to working remotely via Zooms, I think actually there has been a little bit of good that has come out of it. Has given people a little bit of time to pause and to think of better ways to do things. And I know for me, particularly that first lockdown was really beneficial on that front.
This is fascinating. We're rapidly running out of time, but I just want to come back to maybe an opportunity, an initiative that might bring all of this together. Here we are trying to brainstorm, trying to start some conversations united via sport and this platform across 4 episodes, one to come next week, looking at elite and franchise sport in Auckland. But I'll ask each of you, Mike, has there been an opportunity? Would you love to get an invite? Should we do something in the shape of a forum, a seminar, a summit, and who should initiate that?
Oh, I think it'd be a welcome opportunity. As Danny says, I think we're at a point now where we are, sort of reflecting on how we've had to adapt to this new COVID environment, and I think it's provided us some very valuable insights and some new ways of doing things. And in that frame of mind, then having people come together and to explore alternatives, some new ideas, and come up with some solutions for Auckland sport, which I think would have wide application across the country, would be very helpful.
Fiona, your thoughts, and Goodness me, I can only imagine the learnings that other high performance sports might have from Paralympics.
Yeah, well, Sport NZ have taken a leadership approach in this. Paralympics New Zealand were part of a Strengthen and Adapt project. We're part of a first wave of 10 national partners that are collaborating and are looking at supporting each other, both vertically looking at our own structures and systems, but also wider than that and horizontally across the sports sector. So that has been a forum which has enabled Paralympics New Zealand and other organisations to start those conversations and progress those during this period of time. So that's been a great opportunity, but it's an opportunity for us all to, as we've spoken about in so many times, look at doing things differently, better, collaborating more, and seeing what the joint benefit of different opportunities might arise from having those conversations. Sport NZ will be looking at extending that further and extending those conversations further across the sector and taking the learnings from that wave one that we're involved in at the moment to help support the next lot of national partners that will be participating in that as well. So it is creating an environment where people can have those open, those future thinking discussions. What could be, what could it look like, as opposed to what do we do and why do we do it, and allow those organisations to hopefully come up with some great opportunities to strengthen both themselves but then others around them in the sector whilst doing so.
Danny, can you imagine if we got every knight and every sporting dame into the room at the same time? I mean, surely that would be a great idea, and the sharing of thoughts and a wider discussion.
Yeah, look, sort of as been touched on, there's so much transferable knowledge, and I think people having an understanding of some of the challenges that different sports are going through, and I'm sure that a lot can be solved with getting a lot of high quality people with a huge amount of experience and expertise in their own fields together in a room. Like I sort of said earlier, it's blown me away just how open and willing people are to share their own experiences and ideas, and how that can be transferred, particularly, like I said, into my environment. I think it's made our culture within the group a lot stronger based on some of the experiences that other national teams have had.
Great stuff, great stuff. I think I might be building a new project for Dean McLaughlin with United via Sport. But goodness me, where does it end? It could be a week-long conference, or in this modern environment, it could be a 3 or 4 hour seminar via Zoom. But it certainly seems that would be well received by everyone in the industry. Let's recap, and we're virtually out of time now. Let's recap quickly on our action points then, and some initiatives that have come out of these conversations that could well be taken further. By who? There possibly is the challenge, but there certainly are the agencies there. Let's have a look at the action points now and just touch on them before we say farewell to our panel. So embrace the foresight and innovation, rationalise those plans, increase communication across all stakeholders, essentially get in the same room, be at the table to inform funding agencies and determine priorities. That relates to the facilities as well. A collaboration there on the infrastructure, developing those facilities. Have we got the right people around the table? New communication tools, we're seeing it now. And I think certainly that is occurring already. It will continue to grow. And provide athletes with the resilience training and coping mechanisms. That certainly has come through loud and clear. We've been very busy because I think Dean's got 2 slides here in regard to action points. There we go. I wasn't making a liar of him. Hold the Sports Summit. It could be online, but it could be in the same room. There's nothing like that contact if we're allowed. But let's share those ideas and then agree the priorities and collaborate on implementation. We have to be clever in New Zealand the way that we do things. And I think, as has been shown today by our panelists, show leadership and be #United via Sport on positive action, because sport can be a leader in the community in so many different ways. Goodness me, are we seeing that at the moment? So with developments in the United States today around some social movements, and in particular today, the sport of basketball with the NBA. To our panelists, thank you so much for your time. Mike, Fiona and Danny, wish you well in the days, the weeks, the months ahead. I wish I could say I know what's in store for you, but none of us do. But that's part of the excitement of being in the industry. But really appreciate your time, and we look forward to maybe catching up again in that summit, in that forum that might be the next step. But thank you so much for your ideas and your thoughts and your contributions. I want to also acknowledge those that have helped us put this show, and indeed all three shows together so far, as we acknowledge our supporting partners and those that are going to help us bring together our final episode as well. But thanks to Auckland Tourism, Events and Economic Development, Regional Facilities Auckland, and Auckland Stadiums. Francis, thank you for driving this beast so effectively and so accurately at Auckland Live. We hope to be back in your studio for our final episode, and SAS Creative, and as mentioned, to Mike Stanley, Fiona, Allan, and Danny Hay, thank you for your contribution. Our final episode, as we say goodbye for today, is at 11 a.m. on Monday, the 7th of September. This is one that you very much want to be a part of, the future of professional and franchise sport in the Auckland region. And that is going to be a fascinating conversation, and a look at how those franchises can lead the community and can be that focal point. But what does their future look like? You can join us on @United via Sport on Facebook and YouTube, of course, to recap, to look at our previous episodes, or to join us for that final one on the 7th of September. On behalf of Dean McLaughlin and the team that brings this show to you via Zoom today, we hope to be back in the studio on the 7th. And again, from our panel, thank you so much, and go well in this crazy, crazy world that we currently live in, and we'll see you next time.